Hey everyone, and welcome to another video. So today we're checking out another product from Wimius. So this is their G1 model smart projector, and as you can see from the actual box, this one does come with Google TV built in. So I have reviewed a few of their products on the channel, and this is the latest one that they've actually sent out. So a little bit of the tech specs just there. As you can see, it does have Google TV built in, and you also have YouTube, Netflix, Prime Video, and a lot of other apps that will be built in thanks to the Google TV as well. So first thing we'll do is get this unboxed and take a look at what we actually get in the box. Okay, so right at the top you have your accessories pack. So this will have all your cables in it, and then we have the projector, and that is it for what's in the box. Okay, so as you can see just there, this one is slightly different. So if we get it the right way up, you can see this one does actually have quite a lot of function buttons on the top of the unit, and underneath obviously you have your mount just there as well. So when this is ceiling mounted, you can still make use of all those functions. So you have an import, you have up, down, left, right, you have a return, OK, and power. So basically pretty much everything that you'd expect on a remote is contained within the actual unit itself. On the back of the unit you have two speakers, as well as a USB-A import, a HDMI, an IR receiver, and then a headphone jack as well. On the left hand side of the unit you have some venting, and you can see a heatsink just through there. And on the right hand side you have similar. You also have your power port just there as well, and it does look like maybe this grill is removable. So take a look at the front. You have autofocus with a little camera and probably a LiDAR sensor just there, and it does confirm the 1080p resolution. And then you have the actual lens cover, and there is the actual lens itself underneath, as I showed beforehand. So you do have a center adjustable foot if you want to just table mount this or surface mount it, and then you do also have a mount hole just there as well, and removing these will also give you an additional mount for any ceiling mount. So in theory this should be a sort of standard pattern for most ceiling mounted projectors. And yeah, that is everything on the actual unit itself. I'm not sure about the rear firing speakers, because if you do have this just on a desk or something at the back of the room, then you're only going to get sound going backwards. But realistically you always want external sound when it comes to projectors, because you're never going to be mounting this in a place where it's perfectly suited to have audio going either in front or behind it. Okay, so popping that aside, let's take a look at what we get in the accessories. Okay, so the accessory pack is very similar to the other Wimius products. So you do have a cleaning kit there with a sort of Alcantara type cloth just there, as well as two picks in order to clean the lens. You have an after sales card, and then you also have the quick start guide just there as well. We have a HDMI cable included in the pack. We have a UK plug with the figure of 8 connection. So if this isn't suitable, then you can just go out and purchase any figure of 8 cable, and that will work just fine. But it's nice to see that they have actually included a UK plug. And finally the remote. So let's just take this out of the pack. So in terms of feel, it is very plasticky, but that's fine. It is a budget projector after all. In terms of buttons, so this is very similar to like Fire TV and a lot of Roku and a lot of other boxes, set-top boxes. So power, import, you have profile, so that may be customizable. You have microphone, so obviously you do have built-in microphone on this particular remote. You have settings button, back, a TV button, which may also double as the input button, but it may also just deal with the actual picture. You have a home button, and then you have some what looks like dedicated focus buttons, as well as volume up and down. The volume button has a little dot just there, so you can easily identify which one it is. You have a mute button, and then you have some shortcut buttons for YouTube, Netflix, Prime Video, and then that looks like it may well be the smart interface for the actual projector itself. In terms of batteries, yeah, AAA batteries, which aren't included, but that shouldn't be too much of a problem. Okay, so that is everything that you get inside the pack. Next we'll take a look at it set up and take a look at what the picture and brightness and everything like that is like on various different surfaces, but I'll mainly be using this in my cinema room on my 120-inch projector screen. Hey everyone, so welcome to the actual testing for the Wimius G1. So as you can see, I've got this set up on the back row bench of my home cinema, and this is the sort of perfect place I can set it up in order to project onto my 120-inch screen. Now, one thing straight away you will have noticed is the fact that the image is very, very dim. Now, to be fair, I do have all of the curtains open, so this is kind of a stress test, and the video that I'm playing at the moment probably isn't the best example in terms of being bright. If I just try and bring this to maybe something like this may well be a brighter image, but this is going to be the sort of downfall of these kind of projectors. Now, one thing to note is I did have to go through a very extensive setup. So initially when I turned it on, it's got Google TV, so I tried signing straight into that. And the one thing I noticed was that it took an absolute age in order to do the first firmware update. So it was 1.25 gigabytes, and that probably took over an hour. And bear in mind that it's here, this is where I had it set up, and my router is just in there. So whatever's going on with either the processor or the actual Wi-Fi speeds, it's really, really poor. Now let's just skip this forward to get the actual video playing, and we'll get an idea. Now bear in mind that all of my videos are HDR. I didn't really catch it just there whether it played back in HDR or not. It should display a little HDR logo. Yeah, so this is their HDR mode for the actual projector. So I know that these videos are sort of graded to around about 1000 nits, so the image should be pretty bright, but as you can see, with the blinds open, the image is very, very washed out. So that in itself is not my primary concern. Primary concern with this particular projector is the fact that the performance is so slow. With these kind of projectors, generally if you are going to use the built-in software, then it needs to be snappy. Most of the time what I would actually recommend is that you just plug in an Apple TV or Fire Stick and something like that, and don't rely on the built-in software or the operating system of the actual device itself, and that will give you a lot better performance. But for the purposes of the test, I do need to test out how well it actually performs. So now what I'll do is I'll close all the blinds and we'll take a look at what it looks like in sort of peak condition. Okay, so here we are back with all of the curtains closed. So this is as dark as this room is ever really going to get. And as you can see, the projector is still in the setting that it was on. So in terms of picture modes, one of the issues that I found was the fact that the picture modes themselves are extremely dim. And yeah, we're going to run into the same issue that I pointed out before. So the slow performance, so each click of the remote, and the remote is actually probably the best thing about this because it is a Bluetooth remote, so that in itself is a bit of a positive. But if we come into picture modes in terms of editing, this is very limited. But if we just go between vivid, so that's the brightest this will be, and movie, which is probably the best picture mode that it can actually get. So as you can see, there's not a massive difference in terms of the brightness, but peak, like the highest peak brightness, does blow out a lot of the highlights. But yeah, so this is kind of peak performance, and what we'll do is, seeing as this video is not really the best, so we'll go back to one of the sort of darker videos. So it was this that was playing at the start of this video, and yeah, you can probably just see from the adverts in terms of what the performance is going to be like. So in a fully blacked out room, movies are going to be very watchable. Now, one thing to note is this screen that I'm projecting them onto is a 0.4 gain ultra short throw screen. So this is not going to be the best performance in terms of the brightness. That's not the purpose of this test. This is more to test in terms of clarity as well as how big of an image. So I'm having to actually shrink down the corners at the moment. So where this is the best way I can actually get it set up in this room. And the distance, I don't know, maybe, yeah, I'd say probably about 4 meters away from the actual screen where I've got the projector, and obviously it is projecting up a little. So as you can see now, this same video looks a lot more impressive in this light, and obviously that's the downside of having a standard throw projector rather than an ultra short throw, which is obviously you can block the image. But yeah, if we're taking a look at what the image actually looks like, so this is a little bit better in terms of performance once you've kind of killed the ambient light, but the screen itself is reducing the brightness by around about 60% compared to a white screen or white surface, so be that a wall, a screen, or whatever. So the purpose of this is just to show you how well it actually performs. Now, I've tested several of these cheaper projectors in this room, as well as my Hisense L9G that you can see just in the middle of the frame just there. So when that projects on this screen, even with the curtains open, I can still watch certain things. So sports are more than watchable, most TV shows are watchable, but it's more the darker scene movies. So something like this would be easily watchable on the projector, but obviously that's 3000 lumen output, whereas this is supposedly around about between 12 and 1400. But having tested a few of these projectors, I can tell you straight away that it's going to be on the lower end of that scale. So the one projector that I have that is rated at 1400 is, in my mind, is significantly brighter than this. But what I will do is I'll try and get some back-to-back shots of the various ones just to show you like how it actually performs in the same sort of setup. Okay, so that's a test of the actual playback. So in terms of the software, it is Google TV. So in terms of everything that you're getting, this is very similar to what you're basically getting on Fire TV sticks and similar to that. So the interface itself is snappy. It's just the system that is slow. So when you actually press the settings button on the remote, it's all of this that can tend to be a little bit laggy. At the moment, it's actually running a little bit faster, but when you first turn it on, it takes a while for it to actually kick into gear and get moving. Another thing I did find sort of intermittent was the internet connection. So initially, as you can see, my video is here, and when I actually clicked on it, it just brought up an error. So the Wi-Fi connection, it can be a little bit hit and miss. Sometimes you have to go back into settings and re-enable that. In terms of general operation of the Google TV operating system, this seems a little bit more snappy now that it's had a little chance to actually settle down. I did try going into the Netflix and Prime apps, but they obviously need signing into. I don't have a spare account so I can sign into them at the moment, because obviously Netflix are limiting devices, similar with Prime. All of these first party apps will actually load and work perfectly fine. Yeah, they'll get the updates and everything will work exactly as they would on any other set-top box or Apple TV Fire Stick, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, overall the performance is not terrible, but what I would say is the brightness is lacking in terms of being able to project on a darker screen compared to projecting onto just a white wall, where your highlights will be a lot brighter, but your shadows will also look worse as well. So if we just so that's a very bright image, whereas if we come on to something like this, where the darker areas of this screen are, they look better on this screen than they would do compared on a white wall or a white screen. So that's the purpose behind obviously the 0.4 gain screen that I actually utilize. Okay, so this should give you an idea in terms of the noise of the actual projector, and also the distances in terms of where it's actually projecting onto the screen. And if I just cycle through a few of these, so right now I do have half the curtains open, so in theory it's not going directly onto the screen, but obviously the ambient light that gets thrown onto the reflected light will sort of wash out the image. So the image should pop a little bit better if it's in a sort of fully blacked out room, and it will also pop a little bit better if it's projected onto a white surface, but you will then have higher shadow detail as well. So your shadows will be erased and it will sort of look washed out, similar to what this is doing at the moment. So having the blacked out room with the ultra short throw or the 0.4 gain screen is kind of the best of both worlds, because it gives you those as deep blacks as you can get, whilst obviously not being able to maintain the highest highlights. But in theory, on these kind of projectors, what I did find was if you do put it in the brightest modes, then all of your highlights will get blown out, and around the face, all the details, they'll just look completely blown out. Okay, and just to give you another different viewpoint, this is now being recorded on my Sony camera, so hopefully this should actually get rid of some of the weird artifacts that you get when you're recording from iPhone with these kind of projectors. Generally they tend to have a red hue, and whenever I use my Sony camera, generally it can get rid of a lot of that. So just to give you an idea in terms of what's brightness levels and also the contrast that you might be seeing as well. The other part of the video I did record on iPhone, because generally that tends to actually brighten up the image a tiny bit, but it will also enable me to keep a more consistent setup. Okay, so here we are set up in my living room. So this is against a grey wall setup. This TV here is a 65-inch C9 OLED, and currently I have the projector just broadcasting a YouTube stream onto the wall. So this is going straight onto a grey wall. If I just turn the light on, you can see what kind of a shade it is. So you can see the ceiling there against the actual wall itself. In terms of brightness isn't too bad when you're comparing it this size. Obviously the OLED TV's image is a lot richer, a lot more vibrant, but comparing it against the actual TV, it's not too bad when you actually make the image smaller. So I do have the projector set up on a tripod, and I'm projecting it straight onto that wall. So yeah, this just to give you an idea in terms of the different surfaces and what you can expect. One thing I do want to just test is what would happen if I turn the TV off in terms of the brightness. So obviously obviously because the TV was shining some glare into the room, and obviously because it was right next to it as well, that would be taken away from the actual image. So this should give us an idea in terms of what the image looks like just on the wall itself. If I bring this back, in theory what this should do every time you move it is it should actually do its automatic calibration. There we go. So this is the brightest it's going to get in terms of a pure white image, and then it does this where it does its calibration, and then that's it. So once it gets rid of that, so this is, yeah, I would say is possibly just bigger than 65 inches, probably closer to around 70 inch maybe image that's projected onto walls. Obviously it can get a lot bigger than this. You can't really go much smaller. So if I show you, if I bring this closer and we take it much smaller, once it does its focus, before what it was doing was at a certain point it would then no longer focus in, or the image would be off straight. So even right now you can see that was kind of off straight. This is probably the smallest. I would say this is probably, I don't know, maybe around about 40 inch TV, maybe a little bit smaller. Obviously the smaller the image, the brighter it's going to look, the better the colors are going to look, and you probably won't even be able to see the pixels. Whereas when you do zoom out and make it a lot bigger, then you can definitely pick out each individual pixel quite clearly. If you've not got anything set up in your room, then this could work as a TV in quite a few places, but obviously with the tripod setup, it does mean that it's not the same as projectors that have the built-in stand, because them you can just throw on a table or a desk or anything, whereas this you do have to set up a dedicated tripod setup. So let's just see how big we can actually go in this room. So now that I've moved it, it should do its automatic calibration. So yeah, that's not going to go much bigger, I don't think. At the moment I'm kind of limited by the cable, so where the power plug actually is. And yeah, this is another thing, so you can probably just about make out that this line here is not actually straight. So sometimes the automatic calibration isn't perfect, but if you did want to, with this particular one, you can go in and you can adjust that. Okay, so I managed to move the projector almost back to the door now, and this is probably the biggest I'm going to be able to get in this particular room. So that image right now, in comparison to the actual TV, is probably closer to 85 to 90 inch TV compared to the 65 that's just there. So that is a 65 inch TV, and that's the image that we're getting on the wall. This is more than viewable. If I do turn the light on, you can see it completely washes out. For sports, that's probably still viewable, but obviously ideally you want it as dark room as possible. And just for context, in terms of picture settings, apart from the mode, so I have it in movie mode, but for the actual picture settings themselves, this is as bright as it's going to get. So if we just come down to picture, and this does take a few seconds once you actually click on it. So the only thing that's going to make it brighter would be going into vivid mode, so you might just be able to see it's a slight difference, more in color tone than anything else. But one thing you might notice is straight away around his face that the highlights are blown out. So on this one you can see all of his face details and everything, they look how they should look, whereas as soon as you go to vivid mode it's all blown out. Standard mode and movie mode is slightly brighter, but same thing, you're just starting to get onto the edge of where it would be clipping. So for me, movie mode is the one that you want to leave it in, apart from obviously if you are watching sports, then make use of the actual sports mode. Let's just see if that does actually help with motion smoothing, and it does have a game mode as well. So yeah, the game mode is probably the one that you want to use. So no, not really. So just looking at the motions on his face, it doesn't really help with motion smoothing on this particular stream. So it could just be the stream may be limited to 30 FPS, so that might be why it's not actually making any difference. With a console or something connected, that probably would make more of a difference. Even on Gravenberch's face, you can already see starting to blow out the highlights. So for me, the only mode that's really usable would be the movie mode. Okay, so this is the final test. So this is now projecting against a white wall. So as you can see, the image is going to be a lot brighter in terms of the whites, but blacks and basically all of your shadow detail will suffer as a result. So on this screen, the blacks will look more grey than even this thing is capable of doing. So you can see the colors will look rich. If anything, they'll look the richest on this white wall, but it's the blacks that will suffer. But this is just to say that you can project this onto any surface. So you can project it onto a black wall, a grey wall, a white wall, whatever. If you've got a screen, project it onto a screen. If you haven't, you can still make do against an actual wall itself.